There are people who move through the world quietly, too quietly. They speak softly, laugh carefully, and apologize for taking up air that was always theirs to breathe. To them, love feels conditional. Help feels like debt. Presence feels like intrusion. They are the ones who rehearse their words before asking for anything, who shrink in moments of care, who say, "It's fine," even when it isn't. Not because they want to disappear, but because somewhere along the way, they learned that their existence comes with a cost. This is the psychology of those who feel like a burden. It is not weakness. It is adaptation. A tender survival strategy born from the fear of being too much and the longing to finally be enough. There is a particular kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from fear. The kind of silence that fills the space between a question and an apology. You can see it in the way someone hesitates before speaking, how they study the room before deciding if their words deserve to exist in it. They calculate presence like a currency, how much space, how much attention, how much care they are allowed to take before it becomes too much. For them, daily life is a quiet negotiation. They apologize for delays that no one noticed. They whisper sorry when they laugh too loudly, when they interrupt, when they ask for something as small as a glass of water. The apology becomes their second language, not out of politeness, but as a shield. To feel like a burden is to live in constant anticipation of rejection. Every request feels like an inconvenience waiting to be exposed. Every favor, a debt they cannot repay. Even love becomes transactional. They give more than they have, hoping it will justify their existence. And when someone says, "You're not a burden," they nod politely. But deep down, the words bounce off walls built long ago. Because logic cannot erase emotion, and emotion, when shaped by years of subtle dismissal, becomes its own truth. They grow used to being the listener, the helper, the one who says, "Don't worry about me." Their kindness becomes a way to hide their own need. Their generosity, a disguise for loneliness. It is not weakness, it is protection. Because if they can be useful, maybe they can be allowed to stay. If they never ask for too much, maybe no one will leave. Beneath this quiet performance lies a simple aching wish to be held without having to earn it. The story often begins long before self-consciousness blooms. In childhood, the seeds of feeling like a burden are planted silently, invisibly in moments too small to remember, and yet too powerful to forget. A reprimand for speaking out of turn, a glance that communicated disappointment, a parent's sigh that said, "Without words, you are too much." These are the early scripts that shape the self, the subtle choreography of withdrawal, the instinct to shrink, the belief that love must be earned. Some children grow up in households where attention is conditional, measured, or fleeting. Affection is a reward, not a given. Needs are inconvenient, expressed desires unwelcome. A child learns quickly to calculate, when to ask, when to wait, when to disappear into the background. The lesson is not spoken aloud, it is absorbed, engraved into the body and mind, like a silent contract. Neglect need not be total to leave its mark. Even inconsistent care, emotional unpredictability, or a household that rewards independence above all else teaches the same cruel logic: your presence is optional. It is in these formative years that the architecture of guilt and self-doubt is built, brick by invisible brick. The child learns that to be safe is to be small, to be quiet, to disappear just enough to not inconvenience anyone. Sometimes, the burden is projected from external realities: illness, financial strain, parental stress. Sometimes, it is the child's own acute sensitivity to the moods around them. Either way, the outcome is a deeply internalized pattern, a default assumption that asking for help is wrong, that taking space is selfish, that existence itself must be justified. And so, by the time they reach adulthood, the blueprint is already in place: a body that flinches at attention, a mind that anticipates rejection, a heart that hesitates before reaching out. They have learned early that survival sometimes means erasing oneself. And yet, even in this self-erasure, there is an enduring spark, a longing to belong, to be acknowledged, to be enough. The feeling of being a burden is not merely poetic, it has a neural signature. The brain, attuned to threat, can mistake emotional dependence for danger. For those who grew up learning that needs were inconvenient, the amygdala, the sentinel of threat, becomes hyperactive. Every request, Every display of vulnerability sends a subtle alarm. You are too much. You might be rejected. Attachment theory offers one lens. Secure attachment fosters the belief that care is safe, that closeness is nourishing. But insecure attachment, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, teaches the opposite. Intimacy is conditional, affection is fragile, and self-expression carries risk. As adults, these patterns persist unconsciously. They do not choose to feel burdensome. They are wired to anticipate it. Shame conditioning compounds the effect. When a child internalizes the message that their existence is inconvenient, the body carries the judgment into adulthood. They habitually self-monitor, self-edit, and self-deny, interpreting ordinary human needs as moral failings. Guilt and anxiety become chronic companions. Even receiving care can trigger stress responses akin to danger because the body expects rejection or imbalance. Learned helplessness plays a role too. When repeated experiences suggest that asserting needs leads to negative consequences, withdrawal, criticism, or neglect, the mind defaults to suppression. This is not laziness or weakness. It is a learned survival mechanism. The system prioritizes safety over desire, inhibition over expression. Even neurochemistry contributes. Low serotonin and dysregulated oxytocin pathways can amplify self-critical thought and reduce the sense of reward in social reciprocity. In other words, feeling like a burden is both an emotional reality and a biological echo. Yet, paradoxically, these minds are highly attuned to others. They anticipate moods, absorb micro-expressions, calibrate behavior to avoid conflict. Their sensitivity is a gift, misread as flaw, refined by years of negotiating the invisible boundaries of belonging. In their quiet struggle, there is intelligence, subtle, vigilant, endlessly empathic. Within those who feel like a burden, there exists a persistent tug-of-war. One part longs to reach out, to connect, to let themselves be seen. Another part recoils, whispers caution, and retreats into safety. They want intimacy, but fear the very closeness they crave. Every step toward vulnerability feels heavy with risk. Every withdrawal feels necessary for survival. This inner conflict is rarely conscious. It manifests as hesitations, second-guessing, or over-apologizing. They may accept help only partially, decline invitations reluctantly, or downplay their emotions. Even small acts of self-assertion provoke anxiety because asserting needs contradicts the deeply ingrained belief, I am too much. At times, they watch themselves from a distance, observing the contradiction with quiet shame. They chastise themselves for wanting. They envy others who ask freely, who exist without apology. The body reacts to connection as if it were a threat. Tense shoulders, quickened breath, a hollow ache in the chest. The mind interprets generosity from others as transactional. Kindness is given, therefore it must be earned, repaid, or weighed. This internal push and pull creates exhaustion. They carry invisible burdens, the weight of self-monitoring, the cost of constant calculation, the quiet grief of unmet needs. It is a labor of invisibility, performed so carefully that the world often never notices. Yet, within this struggle, a profound empathy develops. They read moods like maps, sense discomfort in subtle gestures, and anticipate the needs of others with acute precision. The paradox is both cruel and tender. They shrink to avoid hurting others, yet their shrinking itself becomes a barrier to connection. Every act of self-preservation leaves them yearning for more. More acceptance, more recognition, more freedom to simply exist. The inner conflict is perpetual, a shadow both protective and restrictive. It is a silent dialogue between fear and desire, between the self that retreats and the self that longs. Change rarely arrives with fanfare. It slips in through a quiet gesture, a single phrase, a presence that refuses to be shaken off. A friend offers help and waits patiently, without judgment. A partner reassures without expectation. A stranger listens fully, without interrupting or minimizing. These moments pierce the armor of self-doubt, subtle yet seismic. The realization is simple and yet revolutionary. Being cared for is not exploitation. Asking for help is not theft. Presence does not demand repayment. In these instances, the mind begins to rewire. Patterns long ingrained, the automatic withdrawal, the over-apology, the instinctive shrinking start to loosen. They notice the weight of pretense easing, just slightly, and feel the space to breathe. Trust does not arrive all at once. It trickles in like sunlight through a narrow window. Small acts of reciprocity become profound. Receiving kindness without guilt teaches the body that the world is not as perilous as previously imagined. They begin to test the waters, a request for a small favor, a moment of honesty about needs. Sometimes it is met with warmth, sometimes with indifference, but each experience reshapes the internal narrative. The realization dawns that human connection is a shared rhythm, not a ledger of debts. Even so, fear does not disappear. Old reflexes linger, hesitation, self-editing, guilt, but they now coexist with new awareness. The shadow of too much shrinks when illuminated by patience and compassion. The mind, long trained to anticipate burden, begins to understand. Some weight can be carried by others, and some burdens are meant to be shared. This is the first soft step toward liberation. The first recognition that existence, unqualified and unapologetic, is enough. Healing for those who feel like a burden is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, incremental, gentle. It begins with permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to voice needs. Permission to exist without precondition. This is not an epiphany or a sudden transformation, but a gradual unlearning of a lifetime of self-erasure. Every small act of claiming space matters. A hand raised to ask for help. A voice lifted to share an opinion. A pause that does not apologize. These acts are revolutionary within a mind trained to shrink, subtle victories that echo louder than any outward achievement. They learn to notice the weight of habitual apology and gently release it, word by word. Trust becomes a practice. They test reciprocity, noticing how support is offered freely, without expectation. They learn that relationships can be mutual, that interdependence is natural, and that the fear of being a burden is often disproportionate to reality. The body relaxes when need is met without judgment. The heart opens slowly, like a shutter adjusting to light. Integration is also about boundaries. Not every need can or should be expressed at once. Learning to differentiate between urgency and habit, between genuine request and reflexive self-denial, becomes part of daily life. This discernment, over time, creates safety within vulnerability. Perhaps most tenderly, they discover patience with themselves. The old scripts do not vanish. They are remembered with understanding rather than shame. They allow themselves to stumble, to ask, to receive, to exist. In this quiet reclamation, they find freedom. It is not the absence of struggle that defines them, but the soft acceptance of their humanity. The slow permission to exist, fully and without apology, becomes both balm and declaration. In the end, there is a stillness that is neither empty nor fleeting. It is the calm after the storm of internal judgment, the gentle pause between breaths that carries a quiet certainty. They are allowed to be. The shadow of burden does not vanish entirely, nor does it need to. It softens, shared now with the world instead of carried alone. They begin to notice the subtle reciprocity of existence. A friend's patience, a partner's attentiveness, a stranger's kindness, each becomes a thread weaving them into the fabric of shared humanity. They realize that being helped is not a betrayal of self. It is a participation in life's natural flow. They understand that love, care, and presence are never debts to be repaid, but rivers in which all may float. Moments once feared, asking, receiving, being seen, become acts of quiet courage. The apology that once punctuated every request is replaced by gentle acknowledgement. I am here. I exist. That is enough. In these acts, the self expands softly, imperceptibly, until the world feels less like a ledger and more like a living, breathing companion. And in the silence between interactions, they feel the lingering beauty of connection. The weight of being a burden was never meant to crush. It was a lens through which they learned empathy, vigilance, and the exquisite fragility of belonging. Now, with tender awareness, they can release some of the weight, allowing presence to exist without guilt, care without strings, and being without apology. The world does not demand their disappearance. It only waits for them to stay, to breathe, to matter. And in that gentle acknowledgement, the soul finds its quiet home.